All right, next we're going to talk about the choroid, which is basically another layer of the eye. This is the middle layer of the eye. Okay, so this is a dark middle layer of the eye. You find a number of things here. You find blood vessels inside this layer, and that's basically going to supply the eye with blood because the eye is an organ. So it's going to need a supply of blood just like every other part of our body. Okay, and you know, the reason why all of our organs need blood is because blood is going to have oxygen and glucose inside of it, which we need in order to do respiration. Every part of our body that's alive is going to need access to this blood. And in the case with the eye, the choroid, or the dark middle layer of the eye, has some of these blood vessels inside of it. All right, next we're going to talk about the ciliary muscle. Okay, so the ciliary muscle basically helps to control the shape of the lens. Remember earlier in our video, we said that the lens helps to control light as that light enters the eye. That's what this video basically shows. It shows the lens controlling the light. Okay, the way how the lens is going to control the light is because it can basically change its shape. So as it changes its shape, that's going to affect how the light is entering the eye. It's going to help to focus that light at the back of the retina. Now, in order for the lens to move, in order to do that, it needs the ciliary muscles. Okay, so this is the ciliary muscles right here. And basically is attached to the lens, and they are basically going to control the shape of the lens. And that's going to help the lens to focus that light towards the back of the eye. Okay, so that basically covers all of the different parts of the eye. Okay, recently we talked about the blind spot, which is right here. It's almost right next to the optic nerve. Okay, so remember, this is a spot of the eye that basically the cone cells and the rod cells are blocked. And because of that, some parts, I guess when you look at things at a certain angle, that object might disappear, okay? Or you might see it start to blur out, okay? Some of that is caused because of the blind spot in some cases. Next, we also talked about the optic nerve. We know the optic nerve is going to carry those nerve impulses, you know, to the brain so that the brain can make, I guess, process that information. We talked about the sclera, which is the tough white outer coat of the eye that's basically going to surround the entire eye and basically hold all these parts together. We also talked about the ciliary muscles, which is used to change the shape of the lens, and that's going to help the lens to focus this light towards the back of the eye. Okay, so that's the blind spot, sclera, ciliary muscle, optic nerve. Okay, I think that covers it, covers just about, I guess, all the parts of the eye that you guys need to know. Okay, we also have the choroid. The choroid is not labeled here, but that's the middle part of the eye. So this right here, the same gray middle part between the sclera and the retina, this middle part here, this is the choroid. It's not labeled, but it's important for you guys to know that. Okay, so some other parts of the eye, you have the lashes, which are basically our eyelashes. You know, we all know that, you know, this is basically the hair that grows from our eyelids. And their job is to basically protect our eyes from dust. And we also have tear ducts that you find inside of the orbital cavity, or the orbital socket which the eye sits in. And this basically creates a fluid that's going to help to cleanse our eye. Okay, so it keeps our eye clean and it stops it from drying out. Okay, so for example, if someone was to fly into your eye, like a piece of dirt or a hair, for example, yeah, the first thing your eye is going to do is it's going to start tearing, or it's going to cause a fluid to basically be released, and that fluid is coming out to basically help to get whatever object was inside your eye. It's trying to help it to get that object out of your eye. And we also have our eyelashes that helps to protect our eye from dust and different things like that that might be blowing towards our eye. So these are just here to help to protect the eye and to help to keep it clean and healthy. Okay, so now that we know all of the parts of the eye, we can talk about how the eye works. Okay, so the first thing that happens is that the eye is going, sorry, the first thing that happens is that light is going to pass through the cornea. Remember, the cornea is a transparent tissue that covers the front part of the eye. Okay, so first it passes through the cornea, then it's going to go to the center of the iris. Remember, that hole is called the pupil. So the color part of the eye is called the iris. That's the blue part, or this little blue color here that you see. That's the iris. The light is passing through the pupil, which is found at the center of the iris. Okay, that light is now going to travel through the lens. This lens is going to focus this light onto the back of the eye, which is the retina. Okay, this retina has cone cells and rod cells inside of it, and these cone cells and rod cells are going to detect this light. It's going to create a nerve impulse. Okay, that happens on the retina because the retina has cone cells and rod cells. Those nerve impulses are now going to travel along the optic nerve, and then it's going to go into the brain. The brain is going to interpret that information and is going to create an image. Okay, so now that we know all the different parts of the eye, what you can do now is you can use this part of the video here. You can pause it, and you can try to see how much different parts of the eye that you can remember. Okay, so you could try to, I guess, name these different parts of the eye. And I also want you to name the part that's the choroid. Okay, moving on. Once you're done with, naming those different parts of the eye, you could use that to just, I guess, test yourself. Now we'll be talking about the different eye disorders and diseases, and also what causes some of those diseases and what effect those diseases are going to have on our eyes. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about, the first disease we're going to talk about is called glaucoma. Okay, so with glaucoma, this is caused by an accumulation of fluid inside the eye. Okay, so the same way how, let's say if you had a balloon and you was trying to fill up that balloon with water, if you fill it up with too much water, eventually that balloon is going to burst or get damaged. Now with glaucoma, you have something similar happening. You have too much fluid that's that's inside of the eye. Okay, so remember with the aqueous humor, you had a watery, clear fluid inside there. Okay, so with people who have glaucoma, they have too much fluid in that part of their eye, and what's going to happen is that it's going to damage the eye. It basically creates too much pressure, and this pressure is going to press on the optic nerve. Okay, remember the optic nerve is important because it's carrying visual images to the brain, or it's carrying visual information to the brain. If the optic nerve was to get damaged from it being, I guess, from there being too much pressure, that can potentially affect someone's vision, okay, if it got bad enough. Okay, so this is what glaucoma is. Basically, you have too much fluid within the eye, and that causes a pressure on the optic nerve. Next, we're going to talk about cataracts. Okay, so with the cataracts, this is going to affect the lens of the eye. Okay, so with a glaucoma, remember it affected the aqueous humor. You have a fluid inside the aqueous humor, and you have too much fluid inside that eye, so it's causing pressure that's pressing on the optic nerve. Now, with cataracts, the lens are being affected. Remember, the lens is the part of the eye that's basically behind the iris, or that's also behind the pupil. Okay, remember the lens is going to help to focus that light onto the back of the eye. Now, usually the lens is supposed to be transparent because you need that light to actually pass through it. But with a person who has cataracts, their lens are basically damaged, or it's basically I guess defective. Okay, so the lens becomes thick and cloudy, and this is going to cause the vision to be blurred because now uh, in a healthy person, their lens is supposed to be transparent. But with a person who have cataract, their lens is becoming opaque. Remember we said opaque was the opposite of transparent. If something is opaque, then the light won't be able to pass through it. Now with a cataract, the vision is going to become blurred, which means that the lens isn't completely opaque, but the lens has basically lost its transparency. So uh, it's basically between opaque and transparent, and we call that translucent. All right, so with a cataract, the lens becomes thick and cloudy, and this causes the vision to be blurred. The next eye disorder we're going to talk about is called conjunctivitis, or the more common name is called pink eye. Now with pink eye, uh, a part of the eye called the conjunctiva is inflamed. When someone is inflamed, basically it's irritated. It might have some type of infection, and that's going to cause it to feel painful or basically uncomfortable. Okay, so this is why with people who have pink eye, their eyes get very red. Okay, that's because the tissue inside of the eyelid as well as surrounding the eye becomes irritated, and that's basically going to cause their eye to become pink. Okay, so it causes painfulness and it's going to cause a gritty feeling. It's going to feel like sand is inside your eye and that you can't, get the sand out. And that is basically caused by the inflammation. When something is inflamed, it becomes red and swollen and it might feel painful. So that's what pink eye is. All right, next we're going to talk about myopia. Another name for myopia is short-sightedness. So if you can't remember myopia, you might be able to remember short-sightedness. Now, if a person who is short-sighted, they basically could only see images that are near to them. Okay, so for example, if you had a book inside your hand, if you were short-sighted, you would be able to read that book as long as you brought that book close enough to your eye. Okay, and a number of things can cause short-sightedness, but usually it has to do with the lens and the cornea. So whenever the lens and the cornea have some type of issue, that's going to cause short-sightedness. Now, in order to correct short-sightedness, this is why some people wear glasses. Remember earlier we said glasses had a lens inside of them, and that these lenses basically have the ability to manipulate the light that's passing through them. So with someone who is short-sighted, they might need a special type of glasses that's going to help them to see better. Okay. And once again, short-sightedness, this is a person who can see something that's close, but they cannot see an object that are far away. Okay, so they can only see objects that are close to them. So someone who is short-sighted, they might be able to see people who's right next to them who they're talking to, but if they try to look at someone who's far off in the distance, they may not be able to recognize them because they're going to be a little bit blurry. And in order to correct myopia, a person is going to need something called a concave lens. But we'll talk more about concave lens later on, as well as convex lens. Okay, so let's go back to our definition of a lens. A lens is a transparent object that is shaped to control light rays. Okay, so remember we have lens inside of our eye, and you also have artificial lens or man-made lens. These are what you're gonna find inside glasses or a magnifying glass, for example. Okay, so a lens is a transparent object that is shaped to control light rays. All right, you have two types of lens. You have concave lens and you have convex lens. Okay, the first type of lens we're going to talk about is called a concave lens. We also call them divergent lens. The reason why we call it that is because as light passes through it, it's going to cause the light to basically separate or to spread out. Okay, with a concave lens, it's basically thicker at the ends and it's going to be thinner at the center. So this shape right here, this is how a concave lens looks. This is very important for you guys to remember. And remember I said that as light passes through this concave lens, it's going to cause that light to spread out. Okay, so that's why we also call concave lens divergent lens, because it's causing the light to divide or to spread out and to go into different directions. Now, if someone who is short-sighted, or for someone who has myopia, their lens basically have an irregular shape that causes the light that's passing through it to basically meet before it reaches the retina. Okay, and that's going to cause them to see a blurry image. Okay, so if you look at this picture here, you see that the light is coming into this person who is short-sighted, and that light is basically being focused at this little spot right here. Now, what should actually happen is that light should be focused at the back of the eye where the retina is. But because it focuses here, that causes them to see a blurry image. But with a concave lens, when this light passes through this concave lens, that's going to help their eye to basically create a better image. Because in this picture here, now you have this point here touching the back of the retina. So the lens can now focus this light to the back of the eye with the help of this concave lens. So for someone who is short-sighted, or for someone who has a trouble, seeing objects that are far, someone who can only see objects that are close by or see persons who are close by, they're going to need concave lens. So whenever they wear glasses, the glasses that they're wearing are going to be concave, and that's going to help them to see objects near and far. So that's going to help to improve their eyesight so that they don't see any blurry images. Okay, we also have something called hypermetropia. Now, hypermetropia, this is the opposite of being nearsighted. So we call this one long-sightedness. With someone who is long-sightedness, for someone who is long-sighted, they can see objects that are far away. Okay, so if you look at this picture here, they would be able to see a clear image of things that are far away. So you can basically see trees, and you can see these houses off in the distance, and you can see a clear image. But if they were talking to someone and that person was right next to them, they would basically see a blurry image. Okay, so with hypermetropia or long-sightedness, they can only see things far away. That's why it's called long-sighted, because they can only see things that are a long distance from them, or they can only see things that are far away from them. Okay, whenever it comes to seeing things up close, it's going to be blurry. So for someone who's long-sighted, if they're trying to read a book, they won't be able to read a book because the words in the book are going to be too blurry. However, I guess if they were to try to move that book away from them, maybe then they'd be able to see a clear image. Now, in order to correct this, they're also going to need a special type of lens, and that lens is called a convex lens. Now, with this picture here, it basically shows what happens in the eye of someone who is long-sighted or have hypermetropia. Okay, so basically the lens, it's creating an image, but that image basically comes to a point towards the back of the eye. Okay, so the retina here Remember, the retina is right here. This is the back layer of the eye, or I guess the back wall of the eye where you find cone cells and rod cells. Because these lines that represent light do not meet at a point, they're still spread it out. They don't meet at a point until I guess it reaches the back of the eye. But for the eye, that's not helpful because for the eye, the light is not going to be focused on the retina. So that's why someone who is long-sighted, they can only see objects far away. They can't see objects that are too close to them. Okay, and in order to fix that, they are going to need a convex lens. Now, convex lens, they're going to be thinner at the end of the lens, and they're going to be thicker at the center. So it's almost the opposite of a concave lens. Okay, it's going to have this little, I guess you could call this a diamond or an oval. It has this little oval shape. It's thinner at the end and it's thicker at the center. And this convex lens basically is going to cause the light to focus at this point right here, okay? We also call that converging, okay? So another name for convex lens, we also call them a converging lens. It's gonna help light to meet at a point. And if you look at this picture here, where this person, remember I said, but someone who is long-sighted, the light is going to focus at the back or behind the eye. Once this person wears a convex lens, that's going to help to refocus that image to the back or on the retina. Okay, so for someone who is far-sighted, they're going to need convex lens. For someone who is nearsighted, they're going to need concave lens. All right, so with this right here, you can use this to test yourself. You could basically try to figure out which one is a convex lens or which one is a concave lens. All right, and now we're going to answer some questions, and that will be it for this video. So let's see if I can zoom in here. Okay, so first question right here. I guess what you guys could do, you could pause this video and you could attempt to answer these questions yourselves. And once you have all your answers, you could press play again, and then you could use my answers. Well, you could compare your answers to my answer to see if you got it right. Okay, so with this first question here, you just have to label the different parts of the eye. You have P here. Remember, P is the vitreous humor. You have Q. Q is the lens. R is the cornea. Remember, the cornea is the transparent front part of the eye. S is the retina. Okay, S is the retina. All right. Another thing to note about the retina, I don't know if you guys could see this little dip right here, but that's a special part of the retina called the fovea. The fovea has a very high concentration of cone cells. Okay, so I guess you could try to write that down somewhere to take note of that. So basically, the fovea has a lot of cone cells, and that helps the eye to detect color. So that's where you find the highest concentration of cone cells. It's called the fovea, which is a part of the retina. But for S right here, I guess if this line was pointing directly here, where you see this little dip, you would call that the fovea. But it seems to be in the middle here, so you could just call that the retina. All right, moving on. Name the part of the eye that controls the amount of light entering it. That's called the iris. Remember that iris has the ability to dilate or contract, and that's going to change the shape of the pupil. All right, C says name the nerve that connects the eye with the brain. That's called the optic nerve. D, diagram X and Y below shows two type of eye defects. We talked about 5, and they want you to say which one is X, which one is Y. Okay, so with X, this is someone who is nearsighted. With Y, that's someone who is long-sighted. Okay, so that's the name of the eye defect. Another name for X is myopia, and another name for Y is hypermetropia. But I guess long-sighted and far-sighted would probably be a little bit easier for you guys to remember. Here's another way to help you guys to remember this. The one that's short-sighted, basically, the light travels a short distance towards, I guess, inside of the eye. So this right here, this is shorter than this right here. This is the longer one. So the one that's short, we're going to call this short-sighted. The one that's long and passes the back of the eye, we're going to call this long-sighted. All right, name the type of lens which would correct the eye defect shown. Okay, so with nearsighted, remember you're going to need a divergent lens or a concave lens. With Y, for the person who is long-sighted, they're going to need a convergent lens, or another name for convergent lens is a convex lens. Okay, so that's it for this video here. I'll be posting another video for you guys, hopefully by Monday. Okay, so this is the end of the lesson, and here are some keywords for you guys. You can basically look at each of these words and try to see if you can remember which part of the eye it is or what it does. Or you could try to basically, I guess, remember the definition of these different parts of the eye before you're done with this video. Okay, so that's it for our lesson for today. And like I said, you guys will be hearing from me again very soon.